The death of Agile. Let's get into it. I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support said they're coming out Tuesday to finally get rid of that thing. I hope they bring the right tool this time. But anyway, so I'm going to be talking, responding, or not responding to, talking about whatever, same thing, about the death of Agile by Alan Holub in the context of adventure-driven development. This is about 9 years ago. I'm surprised that we still have people pushing the Agile stuff when we know, and it's been proven now, that we kind of knew it back then, that it's just not the thing. It kind of describes the thing, but it doesn't prescribe the thing, and that was where it fell apart, right? It was a description of something, a mindset, rather than a prescription of a list of things that the preservers all require, the managers who run these departments to get on board with the certification and the licensing and the trademark week-long agile transformation, etc. that these guys will pay for to make the developers try and get them to get on to some kind of cadence, some kind of production, not be so stuck. It's like, well, you may not find it in Agile. So now one thing I also want to say is Alan Holub. A lot of people hate this guy. I don't know why they hate him so much, but maybe it's just the way he talks, whatever. I think it's great. I think he's very direct. He's talking about the things I've seen and the issues I've had with it, and having a different approach. But people really hate this guy a lot. I don't really understand where the hate's coming from, but I appreciate him. And even if I don't politically align with him, with his politics, whatever, I definitely align with him on this issue of how to write software in an effective way, at least new software. Something that's already rewritten, that doesn't matter. That can be done waterfall, but something new. So let's get into it.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to change tone a little bit here because I'm not going to talk about code at all. I'm going to talk about how to produce code. And in particular, I'm going to talk about Agile. Not because, well, let's put it this way. I think Agile is by far the best way that we know to produce software. And at the same time, I think the notion of Agile software development is being completely destroyed by most of the Agile community.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the death of Agile, what I'm really talking about is the death of what I think of as real agility, and a replacement of real agility with a kind of fake agility that is suitable for corporations but doesn't really work in the real world.
Yeah.
So let me explain exactly what I'm talking about. I would explain it if my clicker was working. There it is. So the reason I'm doing this talk is because as a consultant, I often come into companies and give them advice about Agile process. And I am just getting sick to death of dealing with the aftermath of the certified Scrum guys. And right, is that they come in, they do their thing, and they leave.
This is why people don't like them.
And there are a lot of issues surrounding that. But Scrum is really a problem, is the problem. It is not the solution. And the basic problem is the notion of a cargo cult. Now, the cargo cults happened in the Pacific Islands during World War II. The islanders were living happily on their islands without any cares in the world, eating fruit as it drops off of trees. But they were living in the Stone Age. A few minutes later, it seems.
Happily in paradise, by the way, without a care in the world.
A bunch of soldiers land on the island. They make a runway, and then airplanes start landing. And the airplanes bring with them the 20th century. So all of a sudden, these guys have gone from the Stone Age to the 20th century because of these air bases. And 5 years later, all of those soldiers get back onto their airplanes, and they fly away, and the people who lived on the island are back in the Stone Ages. Right. And what they saw were the airplanes. Is what they said, if we can only bring the airplanes back, they're going to bring back the cargo.
Right.
So what they started doing is building things that look like airplanes in the hopes that if they...
Well, that's not exactly what they did. They thought the cargo planes that were coming in were for them, and that these soldiers, whatever, they were somehow doing some weird voodoo that made them come to them, to the soldiers, and not to the islanders. So they were like jealous. They're like, wait a second, we can do the ritual like you can, and it's our stuff. You guys are stealing it. That was actually their attitude. And it's important that's an important distinction, because this cargo culting thing comes from that same mindset. They don't want to go through all the things that the soldiers had to do to get the actual planes to land, which is have a whole bunch of wars in Europe and have this escalating violence structure that got mechanized somehow with the industrial age with steam engines that were invented, and all this precision stuff and all this interplay of all these powers that were getting technologies and getting one up on each other, and they would use the bombs on them, and they would just kill millions of people, put them in pits, line them up with pits, and start thrashing each other, and then out of that we develop these engines, these airplanes that then drop bombs on each other. Oh, they don't want to go through all that bullshit. Who does? But that's the thing. That's like the cargo cult says we can just skip that, right? We don't need to do that. We need to go through all the rigmarole and the gnashing of teeth and just the terribleness of having to go through that kind of technological leap that involve millions of people dying. We don't want to do that. We just want to do the ritual. And they think they're going to get the same results. Like, no, man, you got to go through the bullshit. Like, look, you have to go. You cannot avoid this. Look, for all the stuff that happened, somebody started off with a tutorial, a personal project, and they did a small little project. And eventually they got up and they went adventure driven. And they were just off the script, doing their own thing, and they found a cave opening for some kind of solution that they had enough tools that they did develop from doing all the stuff down here that they got the ability to create something brand new, right? So they went through all the slog. So that represents going through all the wars and stuff that got the planes to arrive. You know, the planes where that stuff came from was all this bullshit down here, and someone's thinking, no, I'm going to go up here. So, okay, so it was not the rituals that these people were all doing at the time when they discovered this stuff. It's the courage and the creativity and the desire and the need and all this pressure, this pressure of war and famine, death, all that stuff pushed all that stuff together to get all these things together to bring us to these technologies. It wasn't just one thing that we do the cadence of the beatings like this and it's fine. It's like, no.
They build it, they will come. If the airplanes flying overhead see their brethren on the ground, they're going to land and bring the cargo with them, which of course didn't happen. Now the problem with the cargo cult then is what they're doing is they're going through the motions. Is the guys in the cargo cults would build fake conning towers, and they would wear coconuts over their ears pretending to be headphones, and they would act as if they were a working airport in the hopes that the airplanes would land. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that we do this all the time, as we see cargo cults everywhere. And the biggest cargo cult of all, in fact, is the modern corporation.
Yeah.
Is that corporations are cargo cults because they believe that there are certain ways to do things and they cannot conceive that there is another way of doing things.
Yeah.
I participate a lot in one of the LinkedIn Agile groups. And one of the characteristics of this group is that there's a constant stream of wrong questions. There's a constant stream of questions that are so wrong that you don't even understand how someone can ask them in the context of Agile. Somebody will always say, every couple of weeks, somebody posts a question, what's the role of a project manager on the Agile team?
There is no role.
The answer is, there is no project manager on the Agile team.
Yeah, that's a silly
But people don't understand that.
So because the reason why they don't understand is not because they're stupid. It's because they've been trained in these institution, MBAs, whatever, Harvard Business School, that every process in business is a business process that can be production lined. So that's what they're saying. It's like every business can be production line. And they're right, they can, except for knowledge work. Knowledge work is this other things. Like once we have the product, stamping out the widgets, we can production line the shit out of that. But how do we figure out what to make? That part ain't got no fucking plan, man. And you have to it's exploratory. It's what I call corrigative explore development. Someone has the nuts to go waste the time because there's lots of guys doing it, right? And then some of the guys have doing it on the weekends, do it here part time here and there, doing a side gig, and some people do it full time. It can come from anywhere. Anyone can get the inspiration once if they have the genius enough, they're putting their mind to it. Somebody's going to come up with something, but there's a whole bunch of people doing it, and they all have courage to even try, and they're also exploring it while developing it. And unless you have that attitude, you're not going to be able to. If your culture doesn't support it, definitely not going to happen. But if your culture, even if your culture supports it, they're all competing. Everyone's got crazy ideas. Most of them don't work. Most of them are half-assed or half thought through or radioactive or explodes in your face. There's all kinds of problems, right? You can be shot down one magnesium bullet, destroy your whole $100,000 device. Yeah, that's kind of stuff. So it's a cycle. It's going through that stuff and having the courage to go and do it and have the wherewithal to even complete it, probably even close. It's not knowledge work is not reproducible cookie cutter. And that's where businesses, that have grew up in this industrial age, they think that everything can. And once you have the thing, yes, if you got product market fit, yes, you can cookie cutter the hell out of it and optimize it. But before that, that's where you do need a project manager to do the production line. How much do you split it up to who? Which manufacturer? Then get the quality control. Somebody has to manage all that stuff. So definitely necessary, but not in knowledge work. I mean, we could manage the whole. We know which way we're going. We have an idea of how far we are away, but usually not. Maybe not. We don't know which exactly. We're making a new map, guys. Once the map is made, you can print that shit like crazy. You could have 15 printers and all that stuff. But how do you make the map? Who's going to go out there and go risk their neck? Who's going to go risk their neck going exploring out there in the wilderness with bears? There's bugs and rivers, and you're out there on your own. And if you're done, you're done. You run out of food, you get stuck somewhere, you're done. So who wants to do that?
They're so convinced, because that's the way the corporations think, that a project manager is a necessary part of work, that they cannot imagine a world in which a project manager does not.
Right, because they don't know the distinction between the two. They haven't made. I don't know why this hasn't been pointed out to them that there's the two things, and the knowledge work that everyone's super into all of a sudden. That's different than the production line stuff. And these people are coming from production lines like, we can just do a production line on this thing. Just have 16 programmers. Look, if it takes one programmer 9 months to make a baby, we'll just take 9 programmers and it'll take 1 month to make a baby, right?
Exist. So like the proverbial camel here is that a corporation cannot fit through an eye of the needle, is that it can't make the changes that it needs to make because it's a cargo cult, because it does things over and over again by rote without really understanding why it's doing any of the things that it does.
Because that's what's made it successful. That's what keeps it the money. The big corporations or the preserver types, they acquire the ideas from people doing this collaborative explore development type of thing where they're finding new stuff, a new technology, new technique, a new thing that blows everything else out of the water all of a sudden. And then they acquire that because that's what they do. And then they milk the shit out of it and try to put it in all kinds of different markets. And then they get convinced to get rid of it by a new guy coming in that says, no, you can't do it that way. You do this other way. That's the whole thing.
In particular, what they're looking for is a very specific process that they can follow. The corporations are really into process.
Absolutely.
Is that what they want to do is they want to do something easy. They want to bring in the trainers. They want to train a few people in the engineering department to follow some process. And they think that
they have been sold by those people, by the Scrum Masters and the Agile people. They've been sold. The marketing brochure said, all you got to do is train people to do this explore development thing, which they have all kinds of responsibility, but no agency, so they can't actually change anything. They're supposed to do it. And with give you make light bulb. Make light bulb. Okay, make light bulb last forever. Create the computer from scratch. It's like, dude, what do you? Okay, so it's really good. It's really silly how they approach it. But the thing is, every once in a while they get successful. These guys will get successful. They'll somehow, some way, hook or by crook, they'll figure it out, and all of a sudden they're on top.
By following that process, that there will be some sort of good result. But in fact, you don't get a good result by following a specific process. It just doesn't work.
Well,
in other words,
you can't make knowledge work into a process. That's the thing, because you're trying to find something new, and you can't make that into a process. Now, once you found it, yeah, you make that all the way long. But like finding something new, how long does it take? It takes forever. You don't even know if it's the right thing or not. You have no idea. It costs millions of dollars to test these things and build them and study them. It takes years. Who's got that kind of time? I ain't got time for that.
What the corporations want is this kind of Agile, right? They want a canned thing.
Wouldn't
right?
that be
Something
nice?
that you can just open up the can and do it, and it's somehow going to magically change the way that things work in a positive way. But often when they bring in the Agile, this kind of Agile, they don't really want to change the way things work. Because they just read about Agile someplace, and they think it's a good thing, and they think that there's going to be some kind of benefit, but they don't really know what the benefits are. So this is just really, really a bad idea. Now, what is Agile really?
But they don't know that. How would they know that? They've never been told there's a difference between knowledge work and industrial production line stuff. How would they find out? Unless they've been in doing something adventure-driven before, and they understand there's a different way of doing these things. It's like knowledge work is this other thing. It's context. It's your culture. It's your bias. It's your ethics. It's your morality. It's your how you approach things. Well, who's the customer? Is it the guys on Wall Street? Is it your VC, or is it someone paying the subscription fee? Who's the customer? Or is you're selling your message to a data broker somewhere? Who's the customer? Like, who are you serving? Right? How do you treat them?
Agile is defined by the Agile Manifesto. And the Agile Manifesto, as you can see here, is very simple. There's 4 points on it, and the first one is the most interesting one, is that the way that people work with one another is more important than processes. Now, notice that it doesn't say instead of.
That never got anywhere. This stuff right here, throw that shit out.
Process is important.
The big corporation was like, helping? What? Uncovering? No, you have to. We spent $1 million on this course, sir. We spent $1 million having you go through this month-long Agile transformation training. We're not uncovering shit. You uncover it. You're supposed to tell us. We're paying for it, ding dong. And we're not. Don't help. No, we want to show people. We want to tell people what to do. And what is this? This is the original one. your agile transformation.
Agile has a lot of process associated with it, and the processes help. But the processes are not canned things. They're things that the individuals come up with as they interact with each other.
Exactly.
In other words, the word agility has to apply to the process as much as it applies to anything else.
Right.
If you're not agile in the way that you build software, then you're not going to be agile.
Correct.
So the whole notion of individuals' and interactions over processes and tools has kind of fallen by the wayside. Scrum is a process.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe that Scrum and Agile are the same thing,
No.
and that's just wrong.
Absolutely.
Scrum is a process.
So Scrum came from some Japanese company, Toyota, for Japanese people doing a Japanese production type style thing with a Japanese mindset on a Japanese production line for making Japanese cars. It ain't for just everybody. It's like, this is the way you make software now. It's like, what do you mean? That's why you make Toyota Japanese cars. What are you talking about?
So by saying we're doing Scrum, what you're saying is that the process is more important than the people that are doing the process.
Yeah.
And that just is not going to work in any kind of situation.
Exactly, because that's what they know,
Now,
man.
my rule of thumb here then is to see if something makes sense. In any sentence where you see the word agile, if you can replace that word with the word flexible, then you've got a proper sentence.
Right.
If you say we do things in an agile way, that works for me. If you say Agile says that we should do X, that doesn't work for me at all.
Man, talk about, this is another reason. This particular phrase, I'll use the sentence here. Oh yeah, I'll get people in trouble.
What we want is flexibility. The whole point of Agile is to get agility. In other words, what we want to be able to do is we want to quickly adapt to changing requirements, be those changes coming from inside or outside. Either the customer is mandating them or we're mandating them because there's some internal process thing, a technology thing that changes, and we need to change internally.
That takes agency. Not just responsibility, it takes agency, right? To be able to change a process. Oh, let the developers change the process. Oh my goodness. That's what people in the corporations, when you say that, it's like, no, we give you the process. You don't change the process. I got money in that process.
But what we need is agility. We need flexibility. We need the ability to change. And a corporation, at least many corporations, are incapable of doing that.
Yeah.
So I suppose the one thing that
they have money in those check boxes. Look, they've got licenses, they got seats, they got keys, they got training exercises, they got documentation, they got newsletters. They got money in those boxes, man.
will agree with the Agile skeptics about is that I think the vast majority of large companies cannot ever be Agile because it is the very nature of those large companies to not be flexible about things.
Correct. Right, that's how they make money.
Inflexibility is just built into things, right? So our rule of thumb here, what we have to work with then is how do you define that it's Agile? If there is a significant requirements change, and it could be significant, right? I suddenly have to make this a cell phone app. Can you do it? That's the question. And can you do it quickly? You know, think about what's involved with making this change.
Quickly? What do you mean quickly? If we haven't done anything before, how do we know how we're done when we haven't done it yet? If it hasn't been done before, how do we know what does quick mean? Was it quick when Dwoz discovered that he could make an Apple II into a color computer a year before when he was working on that project for doing that breakout with the film that's on the black and white TV to make it change colors? How long would that take? Oh, you don't know how long that should take? Well, it took him a year before he actually made the hardware, but how long is it supposed to take? It'd never been done before. Before that, it was $5,000 in chips. He made it $1 a chip. So how long is that? How long should that? How is that quick? You should have said to Dwoz, you should have took 6 months. You should have took a month to do that instead of a year. He was working on print calculators. What are you talking about? What is quick? It's really odd. It's just odd. For something new that hasn't been seen before, you don't know how long it's going to take. And that's the risk. And that's knowledge work risk, right? Because most people are going to find it. And we know that. I mean, most people are going to find part of it, or it's like not quite there. This fits this thing, but not this thing over here, or it took you too long. You're missing it, or you're working on this other problem that has nothing to do with the thing that we actually wanted you to let's go.
Change. There's a lot of training that has to go on. There's a lot of learning that has to go on. You might have to bring new people into the team in order to help you make the change. Right? Our goal is to get the app into users' hands in a few weeks. Well, again, speaking as a consultant, I can tell you that when I'm hired to do training, often as long as 4 months elapses from the time that I'm first contacted by somebody who needs the training until the time that I can come in and actually give the training. Believe me, if it takes 4 months to get training, you're not Agile.
Well,
so we have a corporate process.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, if you're trying to do these transformations, these companies, you have to get approval by these managers, and they've been told to build goods by a lot of people. So they're not going to be all like, oh my God, let's get on it because we have to get on it right now because it's going to do the whole thing. They are also aware that this shit's fucked up. They don't have a solution because they're trying to make it a production process, and they're frustrated. They're doing PIP programs. They're reviewing PRs. They have lots of CI/CD pipelines. They're doing all kinds of tested things, all these automated tests that seem to run for hours, and we still have problems. So yeah, they're going to be a little skittish, I think, and rightfully so, because I got to realize that software is knowledge work. No matter how much you want to push it around, maybe legacy is not, but even then, there's like, oh, are those people still around? If they're not, well, guess what? You're on an exploratory process to figure out what the hell was going on when these people were writing this thing on a sprint. They get it out the door that weekend.
It's there for some reason, right? Somebody has decided that corporate governance mandates that we have controls over our spending. And what that's doing is it's making it impossible for the organization to be agile. Friction, Neil talked a moment ago about friction. This is what we're talking about here is friction. Is that what agility is really about is eliminating friction within the organization. And if you have an organization in which you cannot eliminate friction,
but it's also like, it's also changing who's in charge. That's not good. You're basically so these managers have hired you on, and you're basically saying, well, you gotta let the developers try. These developers don't know what the hell they're doing. They've proven they don't know anything. So there's maybe a skill issue involved, but also you're asking people to let go of something they've been told they must have a tight rein on, and you're asking them to let go of it. And you ask them that they're also irrelevant unless they can they're pulling tickets, running designs, architecture, getting customers, doing sales, writing copy on the marketing, making websites, making contacts, getting lists together, automated email system. No, none of it. Unless you're doing some of that stuff, you're not really doing tech. You're not really involved. If you're just like, oh, I got that guy's doing that and that guy's doing it. It's like if you're telling people what to do and you actually don't know how to do any of that stuff, you're not helping in tech. You're doing something else. You're doing a luxury job that's about to be eliminated.
Chances of you being agile are basically zero. Which brings me to my second kind of major point here, is that the corporations believe that agile just happens inside engineering. And that all that you do is bring in the trainers and teach them Scrum and you're done. But in fact, agile is an organizational thing. There are no silos in an agile organization.
Correct.
The organization as a whole is what's agile. Not the teams, not the people on the teams, not the departments, but the entire organization.
Right.
Because if I need my training, I need my training.
That's why adventure driven. That's why it's less than 7 people. It's usually somebody already has heard about there's a cave opening somewhere, like a problem that can be solved with the resources that he's collected. And it's a small enough people that have a high enough skill set each that can start to make the journey up the mountain to attack the dragon, which is the customer and his objections. Okay, so if you have too many people, it gets all clusterfucked around, and people are like, oh, I don't know. That sounds dangerous. Yeah, it's super dangerous. And we could waste a lot of time. You're probably going to fail. You're probably going to fail. Oh, but I don't want to fail.
Now. So if there's a separate finance department that's providing friction, that's getting in the way of me getting my training, there is no way that there's going to be any agility inside that organization.
If you're not willing to fail, you're not willing to go to the mountains. So you'll be back down here in these pits. You'll be down here. If you're not willing to give it a try and possibly have to go and stop and start over, get down here in one of these tunnels of fake Agile doing Scrum Coach death marches, cargo cults, tar pits of seemingly good ideas, lava lakes of direction competition, the lead mines, dungeon grinds, Jira bird down slog, feature factories, or get caught in a really nice dev agency, silver horde making, killing the same bug over and over and over and over and over and over again for all people that are trying to do the attack runs on the dragon, and meeting all the objections and to get the golden chalice, whichever that is for you. It could be money, it could be fame, it could be clout, it could be like, oh shit, you really did that, or just looking back I went for it, man. Even though I didn't quite make it, I went for it, still made for it, and then doesn't mean you just stop. Doesn't mean there's only one end run. It's like you can go back down here again and come back up, and if you can stick that out, maybe you have a chance to make it.
The next issue is equally important. Is the organization is structured the way it is in order to support a process.
Correct.
It has a process and it must support it. If you change the process, you must also change the organization.
Yeah.
Because if the organization is all built around
I don't know if it's that radical, but you're going to have to change some things. You have to have people that have to have agency about which way to go and how to handle stuff.
A waterfall process, for example, then you can't just suddenly become agile without changing the support, because support for waterfall will not work if you're trying to support agile.
And there has to be this whole so the waterfall is expecting time, delivery dates, and water. It's a production process. So they can measure. They usually every other production process except knowledge work. We know how long things take, and how long they usually take because we did this 55 times for the last 5 years. So we know how long within a margin of error, right? And we can just put that together. And if there's something that gets delayed, maybe we can push things forward, push things back. All that crap. But knowledge work, you can't do that. Basically, you just have a time limit. You got 3 months, guys. and then we want to try to do this thing over here. So do you feel like you could, like, I don't know, maybe it's like sort of like, well, maybe you could look into it more, and we'll start it when you've looked into it more. It's like, I can do 3 months, or I can do 6 weeks, or I got 1 week. It could be your own thing, your own money. Maybe you have a vacation period, 2 weeks, I got 2 weeks. Well, I think I either launch this thing or I have to go back to my job. I have to, like, I'll write this thing during my vacation, and I'll make this thing, see if I can. I see the opening. Maybe there's something there. So you have a time limit, right? And you see what you can get done, and you just prioritize the most important things first, and start getting something out, pushing it out to the customers, getting it in front of the customers as soon as possible. Is this what you want? Is this what you want? Is this kind of close? Is this anywhere near? Hey, coming back, then try to get some traction.
There are lots of things that are part of Agile that people think of as things that cannot be changed, which have to be changed. Right? The QA department. This is one of the reasons it's so difficult for Agile to move into big corporations. In every Agile process that works, testing is integrated into the development process.
Yes, you have to. You have to. The developers have to take tech support calls. They have to talk to the customers. Talking to the customers is fun. I don't know where people got this idea, like, oh, don't let the developers talk to the customer. What? No, that you have to talk to your customers. Your customers are fun. When you deliver something that's somewhere near and gets their problems up, it's super fun feeling. Super fun feeling. Oh my God. People. And these corporations, they take all the pride, like, oh, look at that, our developers are great. And they talk to the customers. Customers love them. So they get the feedback from them. They don't get the direct feedback. Come on now. And you got to take tech support calls. Man, what are you having problems with? Like, oh shit, we fucked that up. Yeah, you're right. That's fucked up. I gotta get that straight. Like, and you'll feel the heat that you like. You have to reduce the complexity of some of these systems, and you can now. So it's actually possible to reduce the complexity, so one developer could handle, or 2 developers can handle this stuff. Until you get 500 or 5,000 customers, and then you might have to get some more support people along. Yes, might have to get more people involved. Okay, but you can still get the core idea going. Come on now.
Integrated. You're testing every.
But yes, there's a time limit.
20 minutes on the outside.
And testing is integrated because if people like to release this stuff, at least the back end stuff, you gotta do testing. The front end stuff, you can get away with it in the beginning without doing tests and all that stuff. Like maybe some happy path integrated testing or end-to-end testing. I'm a big fan of end-to-end testing for your happy path to make sure your logins still work, everything still works. So you don't have to monitor that all the time. You just have that running constantly, and if you want to do that. And you can do that off a home Raspberry Pi server. You don't have to go buy AWS services. You can do that. You don't have to buy all that stuff. You can run that stuff locally. So, and if you're, you don't have to pre-bloat. Don't pre-bloat your development process. Like, cut that stuff away.
Side. I test every 2 or 3 minutes as I'm programmed. By the time the so-called sprint, the iteration is finished, the code is fully tested and ready to deploy. Which is to say, there's nothing for a QA department to do.
So if you test in production, if you have got your system set up so you want to test your whole thing in production, you have some sort of test account that's always cleared out at the end of the day or something, or has a special command that clears it all out, but it's in production, and so you have, when your end-to-end test run, it's in production, so you know that if it runs, it's in production. So come on.
Which means that the director of QA is not going to be very happy about this. Which means that he's going to be fighting really hard to prevent Agile from happening inside the organization.
So we can transform those people, instead of doing the manual testing, that they're going to have to be writing the test for us. They're going to have to help us write the test. And even so if that's their role, that if the project gets big enough, so there's a person that needs to do that, yeah, they can't just be doing manual testing. That has to stop. That stuff they can stop now. It has to stop. It's good to have maybe somebody responsible for doing that stuff. If there is some sort of manual process, yes, that person will be responsible for it. But they got to be more integrated in the team. And we have to figure out ways of like not having that person do manual testing. That they're doing copying, doing ad copy on the website. They're doing marketing. They do some sales. So they got the QA and the sales. So they're actually hearing the objections of the customers on the other end of the line and able to look at how we could, do some UI UX work. Like how could we change this up? So we can meet that new customer requirement. We got this new idea, this new thing. Get them involved with the whole process. Come on now.
Because he's going to lose his job. Now, if it's really an Agile organization, he wouldn't.
He's going to have to change his job. And ADD changes his job, not loses it. And we still need people around there that are smart enough to know how the stuff's all put together. I've never heard of a QA person doing sales, but it would be perfect for them to get on some sales calls, man.
His job is what he would do is change his job in a flexible way so that he could actually do real QA, which is to say it would be his job to look at everybody's processes and make suggestions about how to improve them. But a lot of people are unable to make those changes because, again, they do not have the flexibility.
Correct.
Product development groups, they don't exist. In an Agile organization, the product is developed by the customers who are talking to you on a day-to-day basis.
Well, the developers, not just the customers, the developers who take in the customer suggestions by getting on the phone, making some sales calls. It's not that bad. It's fun. It's fun. If you actually have something that people want and it's going to solve their problem better, it's super fun to talk to them. I don't know why you sit to be behind the keyboard all the time. It jazzes you up seeing people use your stuff. What?
If your customer cannot walk in the front door of the corporation, you cannot be Agile.
Correct.
And it's very difficult for somebody who's not an employee of the corporation to walk in the front door, believe me.
Yeah.
The governance practices, we were talking about finance-related practices a moment ago, is this basic idea of if I need the training, I need it now, not in 6 weeks. If I need a new piece of software, I need it now. An Agile team has a budget, and it spends it however they feel like it.
Well, I mean, that's tough. That's tough. There has to be maybe a little bit of a limiting factor, because usually it's small number of people. But yeah, if you need to buy some new thing or something, it's actually needed, and you really have found out that that's really the thing that you need. Yeah, you should be able to buy something without wait 6 weeks. Come on now, you blow through your whole half your cycle.
Entire team decides to go off to a conference, they do that. They don't ask anybody, they just do it. They need to buy a piece of software, they do it. Right now, they've got to manage their budget.
I mean, that's hardcore, and I understand that the understanding for that. And usually, people that are doing adventure driven, that's how they're running the whole thing. But sometimes you need to talk to somebody. But that person has to know, like, man, we're not just goofing off with these things. There's a reason why we're going to these things. We got skin in the game. We could be doing something else. You know, we have options, right? If you get to the point where you're be able to do a startup that's going to go after something like this, you could be working at a silver horde. You could be working at David Day. You could be working in these things. There are options. You know, we can't be doing other things. So it's like you have to, as someone's going to finance, you have to see that that's the kind of personality they're trying to get it done too. They're not just goofing off trying to collect the paycheck.
Not infinite, but they're the ones making the choice, not some separate governance-related organization. Deadlines. There is no such thing in the Agile world. All of the planning.
Yes, there is. There's one big fat deadline. In ADD. That's why this Agile thing maybe got off the rails with like marketing people and the finance people like no deadlines. Ugh. That's why ADD has a deadline because that's what there really is one. It's just that it's understated in here. It's like, oh well, we could just skirt in here like this and like not give anything up. It's like no, you have to give up what you're giving up is the every 2 week cadence. How many tickets? How many points on the ticket? I had points to time. All that stuff goes out the window because you have a deadline. There's one at the very end, and you better have something to show at the end, and you better be showing stuff all along the way. Because at the end, it's like it's either we're gonna keep going or this fucking project's done.
In Agile is based on priorities. All of it, 100% of it. We've all seen the iron triangle picture, right? Scope versus time versus money.
Yeah.
Well, in Agile, the assumption is what's going to change most often is scope. Requirements always change.
Yes.
And if scope changes in a way that some event that needs to happen isn't going to happen, I have to release at some trade show, the only options you have are to reduce the scope a little bit or to increase spending, which is to say bring on another team.
Oh, don't do that. Maybe reduce scope, but don't bring on somebody else. If you're in a time limit, that's the classic error. Mythical Man Month, the classic error. It's like, okay, so what you're saying is 9 months to make a baby. That means we could have 9 women pregnant and get a baby in a month, right?
So if you're managing in an Agile world and you have a time deadline, if you will, that you're looking at, like a trade show, what you're doing is actually observing the process. Is that Agile is a very transparent way of doing development and doing a projection based on the observed performance of the teams that are doing the work. And if your projection is not right, then you bring a new team on or you reduce scope. Those are your options.
Woo! Bring a new team on. Woo! No, just reduce scope. Bring a new team on. You're just gonna slow everything down, ground to a halt. Come on now.
But there are no deadlines. There are no milestones. There's no estimation in the tradition.
Yes, there's a deadline. There's a milestone. There's no estimations. Fuck that shit. But no estimates. For sure, no estimates. But there's a milestone. There might be milestones along the way. There might be things we want to show you, like when we have certain events, like, okay, got the website up. Okay, we got the back end working. Okay, we got customers database. Okay, we got the processing orders. Okay, blah, 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 blah. And there's a deadline at the very end that you've already pre-negotiated at the very start. So this is the ADD. I'm talking about ADD, and this is kind of like this was with the stuff that they're modeling ads off. This was how it was. The stuff that the people are modeling Agile after they saw that worked was this process. And we all the time limit. Everyone knows what it is. We're not afraid. Or we are afraid because we know that if we blow the deadline, it's probably going to fail. Probably going to be canceled. Have to go get a job someplace else, doing something, another contract somewhere, doing something because this one's over. This one's dead in the water. And that's the risk that we're taking on. Not this, oh my God, you shave a point off the ticket.
Sense. It just doesn't happen. That's a hard one for people to give up, but there we go. So there aren't any timesheets because you don't need them. You're not doing time-based stuff.
Correct.
There's no kind of organizational friction. Is that there's a basic...
Well, so the people you're bringing on board, the ADD, adventure-driven development, the timesheets, you know how long they're working because you're working with them closely. You are there with them, they're there with you. There's no need for timesheets. They know that, hey man, this is something that everyone wants to do, and we really want to make this thing work, and we're going to do our best effort. And if you're just sandbagging it, it's going to fail. So it's like, okay, you can try and do that. And maybe in the ZERP you were able to get along with this, get around the sandbag, and people got super normalized. People just phoning it in with ping pong tables and the video game room and the lattes down in the cafe and all that stuff, and everyone slacking off. The nap rooms. So yeah, maybe you had timesheets in that environment but you're not really producing a hell of a lot that much anyway. But if you're doing adventure-driven stuff, we already know how much you're working.
Lean concept that any effort or time or energy being spent doing something that is not directly supporting putting valuable software into the hands of the users, that's all waste. Filling out an expense report or a timesheet is not providing...
Okay, expense report, maybe you do have to do an expense report if you want to get reimbursed for some fees for some stuff that you had to go do. Come on now, those don't go out the window. Maybe this is why Alan gets a little bit of hate.
Customer value.
Because he's saying stuff. I know it because I've listened to a bunch of his lectures. I know what he's talking about. I know what he's saying, but the way he's saying it in some of these presentations is like, you don't really mean that, but I know what you mean. I know what you're saying because I've gone the nuanced route, which you're getting to. But he's trying to say, look, man, all these processes, all this crap they're having these knowledge workers do is creating a lot of noise and friction that it doesn't really add anything anyway. But now for regular production line employees, it's all super critical. Of course it is. Yes, of course it is. But they're not doing this knowledge work stuff. It takes a special kind of person that wants to even engage this kind of work because it's so it takes over your whole head. Whereas the production line worker, once he's done for the factory, he's off. No one's calling him. He doesn't have a pager calling him saying, you have to come back to the machine, hit the button, look, if you have time. That's not happening. So this is the kind of people that are into knowledge work, that are into this type of thing. You have to be able to detect them, and then the ones that aren't, detect them too, and get rid of them.
So one of the things that an Agile organization has to
do... what happens is that stuff fails. That anyone that's on a team that does the sandbagging stuff, that's not adventure driven, that's doing this Agile style stuff, that what they considered Agile, or what they're talking about before it got corrupted. Yeah, it's gonna be obvious because you can't sandbag, man.
Do is reduce friction by eliminating everything that is in the way of putting value into the hands of the customers, including all of this junk that we've just been talking about. There is no project management in Agile. You trust people to do the work.
Now, the project manager should be transferred into someone who makes websites, does graphic design, does UI UX, does sales, does marketing, does copy, figures out the AI tools to optimize some of that stuff, A/B testing. You can do that kind of stuff, but don't fucking tell me doing a Jira ticket burn down chart you're going to do anything useful. Hey, did you do the Scrum meeting? I don't know, is it a stand-up meeting or is it a retrospective?
The teams manage themselves. There's no middle managers at all, in fact, in an Agile world.
Exactly.
So all of this stuff has got to go.
Yeah.
And big corporations are not going to do it. They are cargo cults. They believe that all this stuff is necessary for a company to function. And a company who doesn't do this cannot function.
And every other company, every other thing that they do in business, yes, except for this one.
And that's nonsense, of course. There are some very large companies that function quite well in an Agile way. But most companies don't believe that that's the way things are going to work.
Correct.
They have their managers and they expect them to work like managers. And more to the point, when some things become Agile, they expect that these same people are just going to change their job titles and suddenly everything's going to be fine. Right?
Yeah.
That's not what it is, right? Is that the job titles is not just a change in titles. It's functional. It's a basic change in what you do.
It's changing who's in charge, Alan. That's the problem. I don't want to say, because they've been having it pretty cushy by just telling people what to do and do burn down charts and then check your ticket and how are you doing on that ticket? How you doing on that ticket? That shit, I need you to come in on the weekends. Yeah, I need you to come in on the weekends.
Agile companies are organized very differently. This is Spotify. People talk a lot about scaling Agile. Spotify has about 500 programmers in it right now, which is about...
It just turned out this was a head fake. In retrospect, we found out later. that they weren't even doing this shit. So who knows how Spotify is doing this stuff. But it's funny that he brings up here and he's like trying to do this guild chapter architect tribe thing. I was at a company that actually took this seriously and they tried to do it. Boy, it's a clusterfuck, man. All it is still people just trying to stay in charge but not be in charge. How's that? They want to stay. They look in charge and want the title of being in charge, but they ain't in charge of shit because they ain't pushing shit. They ain't pulling tickets. They ain't do writing copy. They aren't getting the websites up. Well, they don't contract that stuff out. They're a third party. They're not getting the photography done. They're not getting pictures done. They're not doing UI, no UX. They're not doing any sales calls. We got a sales team for that.
Which is big enough for me to say this model will work regardless of the size of the company. I would argue that if you have a project that requires more than 500 programmers, that what you need to do is break up that project into smaller projects. There is no project on the planet that requires more than 500 programmers. I'm sorry.
Oh, but they will. I think it might be a money laundering operation or some kind of patronage network. It's not clear, but I don't know how you could coordinate that many people. I think if you're just copying somebody else's stuff and you're just tweaking it a little bit, I think you might be able to get away with that stuff. But I don't know what these people are doing. Some of these companies. I mean, I've worked at a couple of these companies like smaller startups, and like some people are like, what do you do all day?
In fact, most projects with 500 programmers on them could be done quite well by 5 programmers.
For sure.
So if Spotify can do this, we can scale. I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at this picture, but the main thing that I want to point out here is that we do not have a hierarchy.
No.
We do not have a org chart that's in a tree form with managers.
More like an assault team. Who's in charge of the assault team? We might have one guy that's the disagreement breaker. If we have a disagreement and a tiebreaker, he'll be the guy, or he's the final say. But we're all going to take hits. We're all in there going to get damaged. We're all got our necks on the line.
And controls and that kind of stuff. We have a kind of matrix, though this isn't a classic matrix organization. But there's no boss. The individual tribes, which are...
I mean, I think there should be a boss. I think there should be one main character he's kind of brings these people on board. He's kind of like handpicks some of these people. And he's like gets along with them and he sees they're adventure driven. Yeah, I can see that. But in Agile, the whole leaderless thing, I think that's a bad idea. Well, it has to be somebody in charge. And usually there is. Naturally there is. So Alan's got a little bit of politics going on here. He thinks that anybody can do this stuff. It's like, no, man. No, not anybody can do this stuff. Not everybody can do Agile. Sorry. Because you have to be kind of weird about the work you're doing to get into it enough, to be dicking around with it enough, for knowledge work, because it just takes over your life. If you get deep and good into something, it takes over your fucking life. And a lot of people got other things they want to do, man. They want to go on ski vacations. They just want to take a boot camp and upgrade from their pool store where they're doing the pool supply store. Or they're working as a manager. Now they want to go work with these tech companies and play the ping pong tables and sleep in the nap room and have lattes with the girls. Look at the shoes I got on. I work at Twitter. I got shoes.
Groups of groups, if you will, do have one guy, a system architect, who's effectively a member of all of the teams, whose job is to make sure there's some architectural coherence across the systems that the people are building.
If you're lucky, mostly that's just negotiating the APIs, right? And if it's even possible. But there has to be a master person, like one person in charge of how this thing's put all together. I go into it in my course. Here it is. My course here. How to program from the ground up. This part here in software design. Right here. These videos right here. Right here. Communicating software designs visually. How can we use drawings and diagrams to visually communicate about software designs? If you watch these 4 videos, you'll be an architect. I mean, it's true.
Not ordering people around either. He's saying, well, we're doing this over here already, so if we do it this way instead, it'll all fit better. And this is a process for grown-ups, so the people on Team B say, okay, we'll do it that way then, because they're being flexible. So nobody's ordering anybody around. This is a very collaborative kind of process.
True, but there has to be someone that says, okay, this is how we're doing it. I know Alan doesn't like that idea, but it's true. And it's just, okay, we're going to go down that route. It's like, this is software as well. If we can make it so we can delay these decisions to the last minute, and also maybe make it possible so if we need to modify, extend, or make read more understandable, we can do that. Mostly if we can like make it so like can we make it so if we make this decision wrong, we can swap it out. Okay, we can do that. It's like, no, we have to decide right now. We'll never change the software. We never change the software. It's like, no, we change software all the time. Please make it possible to change it easier than not. Eesh.
Which brings us to Scrum.
I agree.
Is that Scrum is none of the things that I was just talking about. It's a fixed process. It has two characteristics that a lot of people don't know about. Is first of all, if you look at all the processes in the world, all the Agile processes in the world, Scrum is one of them.
It's just, it's just one of the things that people somehow picked for as default because they didn't have another placeholder, and it was popular at the moment in time when this was happening, when this Agile thing came out. The Scrum thing had kind of come in a little bit, and they said, no, we'll just add it in. It's like, because we got the Toyota success. It's like, fuck, Jesus. A lot of this stuff is this cargo cult stuff. It's like they saw and described a process that somebody else did, and they said, if we just copy this is a very Western thing as well. If we just copy the process and forget about the culture, we can just do everything the process way, and we'll plug it into our thing over here, and we'd be the best ever.
Equate Scrum to Agile. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, well, Agile says X when they mean Scrum says X. The second problem is that Scrum is a relatively small thing, and Agile is a relatively big thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot associated with Agile. In fact, Agile...
With the Scrum, the thing is you can have check boxes. You can have all the things. This meeting this day, this meeting this day. Oh, we got this meeting over here. Like, I got a meeting over here. We got a meeting. And they happen every 2 weeks. You can come to any meeting you want. It's like, guys, the meetings is like the side note. It's like we can figure out that we're going to talk. There's times in the project we need to talk more. And there's times in the project we're not talking as much. And there's times in the project we need to talk more to other people. We're talking inside. Then we talk. It's like we can figure out the communication. This whole Scrum thing was also when we didn't have Slack. We didn't have email wasn't even invented yet. It was like barely nascent. Like we could do inter-office communications. It was like this stuff was so rudimentary when this stuff became the way to do it. It's like we have all this async communication technology. We don't have to have all these damn meetings.
Is not really even just Agile, is that lean techniques have a lot to do with running an effective company in an Agile way.
Ugh.
So it's even bigger than one guy here.
Lean. I hate the whole thing. It's like, the whole point of the lean is like, oh, you're going to make it so it's cheap. It's like, no, dude. No, this stuff is life-ending. It can be super expensive, and it's also expensive with our time and our lives and our brains and the ability to like put up with abuse and not knowing if you're going to make it.
Scrum is a very small thing. Scrum is defined by a 16-page document.
It's just a set of meetings, guys. But everyone gets super hung up on it's like, you must have it or you're not doing Agile. It's like, no, that's not Agile, man. Agile is the ability to say, fuck that shit. That's what Agile is. So Scrum needs to buzz off. Please, Scrum Masters. You got to say no to that stuff. Because that's not Agile at all. That's why we have to change the Agile failed. That's why adventure driven. We talk about this like, hey man, sometimes you're gonna have meetings, and then sometimes you're not gonna have meetings, and sometimes you just do it on Slack. Sometimes you can just send somebody a video. Sometimes you can just make a voice message. You don't have to put 16 paragraphs as a PR. Like make a video. Maybe you can speak it. Maybe it'll make it easier. We made it into a meeting. We can get together after the stand-up. We have the weeds meeting. We talk about the thing. Instead of back and forth in the PR section, we're gonna battle it out for this ticket.
And frankly, you can't define any process in a 16-page document. It just can't be done. So it's very small. More to the point, the Scrum guys imagine that Scrum can be done in a kind of bubble, where nobody outside has to care about what's going on inside that bubble. But we're just seeing people do have to care.
No, it's
is
totally
that the purchasing procedures of the organization.
It's the attitude of the organization, and adults only. Like I think it can only happen for brief periods, for small groups, for very, very brief periods of time. And if you're lucky, look, here's the thing: if you're lucky with adventure driven, guess what? Your organization turns into a preserver where you're doing production on the thing you just you made it, you found it, you got it, you're amazing. Guess what? These guys are coming in and they're going to run it. Come on, it's just how things work, man. That's why AT&T, like when they wanted to do, or that wasn't AT&T, it was Xerox. The Xerox Park was They launched it over into Southern California. And they forgot about it. Like those guys were like, guys, we got a chance here to do some adventure-driven stuff, and they went hog wild. And when they showed the guys back in corporate, they're like, "Is this gonna help us sell printers? You're just gonna help us sell Xerox machines because that's all they care about." And Apple and Microsoft goes and like go get a demo because they got some kind of special deal, whatever, and they get a demo. And they get to look at the thing, and they're like, "Oh, thank you, I'll take that." And you guys, Xerox is like, hold out here. So Xerox is all like, "Oh, you guys aren't gonna do that?" It's like, "No, we're not. They're not gonna let us." It's like, "Oh, that's too bad. We're gonna have to take that and run with it. We should be on Xerox systems, not fucking Apple II microcomputer." I never thought that was a joke. And it took over everything. And Xerox had it in the 70s. It was nuts, man.
Affects what goes on inside the bubble. So it's not a separate bubble. It's not something that can be isolated. The Scrum guys also have no respect at all for the existing processes of the organization when they come in, because they imagine they can just bulldoze those processes out of the way and replace them with Scrum, but what they're really replacing them with is nothing. Because the Scrum is not going to work in a situation where you're not changing the entire organization. And if Scrum is not going to work, people are not going to do it. A lot of times when you see the organizations that have brought in the Scrum guys, a year later they're not doing anything even close to Scrum anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting the support they need to make it work, so they don't do it.
Absolutely.
In terms of the smallness, you look at extreme programming, and extreme programming is made up of a larger set of practices.
That's a format.
The interesting thing about this is the practices are all interwoven and interlocked in complex ways. For example, one of the key practices in extreme programming is that you need to be testing all the time. You're testing every 2 or 3 minutes as you're writing the code.
For back end, yeah, because you're writing the code and you're building out the API, and yeah, it's how you make sure everything's working. Yes, but for front end, I mean, I guess you're running it and looking at it, but I mean, you're making UI tests for all that stuff? Fuck no. So this is why I think these guys need to really clarify when they're talking about front end or back end, because making a test that's silly. Maybe after I get it written and looks like it's operating, I'll maybe write some tests on there, but not ahead of time while I'm writing it. No one does that. Who does that? That's silly. Now, back-end people, if you're not doing that, like, how do you know when your stuff's working? How do you know if it works or not? You're doing that without building your little unit test suite. Okay, that makes sense there. So it's like it's these not nuanced things, and software developers like, oh yes, always testing. Oh yeah, that's the key. It's like, sort of. I mean, how are people writing this stuff? Are they writing the whole thing overnight? In the period usually before they run it? Like, no, they're running it, running. It's like, I don't know how people, it's like, okay.
Another important practice in extreme programming is constant aggressive refactoring.
I mean, yeah, you want to make it better and easier as you go, but sometimes it's good enough for now. It's working. I mean, most of the code you're going to be doing is what? Filtering, mapping, and then transforming and storing it somewhere. I mean, how much refactoring are you doing? Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing about doing the prototype and then doing MVP and then doing a production version, you're going to be refactoring the whole through that process. So don't get all caught up in like, I must refactor.
Every time you look at a piece of code, if it's not right, you fix it.
Well, I mean, Jesus Christ, you'd be all stuck all day in that damn thing. I mean, if it's not working, fix it. If it's not clear, fix it while you're there. Try and look at it after you're done. That it's working. See if you can make it look better. Like change the variable names, move things around, add some error conditions. Like what? This is not rocket science.
But the fact is, you can't do that if you don't have your tests in place. You can't cherry pick these. They all mesh together to make one unified process. Now, you can modify this process, and in fact, the XP teams do that all the time, but they know what they're doing. They understand, well, I have these benefits, and this has this interaction with those things, and if I change this, then I have to change this other stuff too in order to compensate.
So here's one of the things with ADD I'm talking about with KMP, collective code ownership. So if you have one language, one set of libraries, one IDE, that means anybody can look at any of these things, right? You can have the back-end guy look up the iOS code, iOS, if there's some problem with iOS, you can look into it because it's mostly in the Kotlin. He can, because it's just one app, so he can look at the app and all just Kotlin. So that's that. But in an environment where you don't have shared languages, and the languages are changing all the time, the libraries are changing all the time, and the IDE is changing all the time. That's super hard. So that's when you get silos, because you have to. It's changed too much. That's why I'm super jazzed about Kotlin with the KMP with multi-platform. Most of your app is going to be in Kotlin. You don't have to. It's not going to be changing all the goddamn time. They're refining it, but they're not changing the shit out of it all every 4 seconds. They've kind of got it nailed down. It's pretty. I don't think they're going to do much different for the next 5 years. I mean, it's everything you need to do whatever you need to do with it. Come on.
Scrum, though, and what have they done? First of all, they have cherry-picked 2 things. They have stolen the XP planning game directly. Scrum planning is nothing but extreme programming planning. And then they have stolen a bunch of the little stuff, stand-up meetings.
You mean planning? Somebody invented it and they called it We invented planning. That's part of XP now. So if anybody does planning, you stole it. Oh, come on.
And that kind of stuff. And then they've taken 2 other things and transmogrified them to the point where they're unrecognizable. The whole team, among other things, says you should have an actual customer in the room with you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, eventually, yes, you should be talking to the customer. And if you're like doing adventure-driven, which is the stuff I'm talking about, yeah, you ship that thing off. The guy's going to say, did you get the thing? Yeah, I got the thing. I could just check it out. It's like, yeah, I'll check it out today or tomorrow, next day, blah, blah, blah. And you get on the call with them and you check it out together and you mess with it. He says, yeah, I saw this and that and this. What? This is not difficult to do. But for major corporations, talk to the customer. Ooh, we better get a requisition form for that.
People think that when you're doing extreme programming, you don't do design. That's nonsense. What you are doing is you're doing the design incrementally as the program evolves. Instead of spending 3 months talking to a user before you start coding, you put the user in the room with you so you can ask him the question immediately before you start coding.
Well, if that's the best case you have, but if you don't, maybe you do spend a few months talking to the customer about things that might need to have happen before you even start the project. But, so then you do some design up front from that conversation that you've been having. And then you get in there, and then you incrementally make it. It's like we know we need to have an opening screen. We need to have some sort of menuing system. We need to have this back-end thing that processes these orders. These orders come through. They need to go through a processing cycle. Blah, 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 blah. What? This is some design up front. We're not going to say every pixel of everything's screen, every button of every screen, but we might have some buttons on the screens. We might have the menus, how the thing's going to look. Why not? And then we go build that thing, and it's like, oh, here's the things we need to do in the back end. Here's all the functionality. Here's all the events that might happen throughout the system that we can think of right now, and make sure it's flexible enough so we can make it easily changeable. When we obviously not going to have everything put up together, but there's some design before we go off half-cocked. We can at least define some APIs, so the back-end guy and the front-end guy can do things. If it's the same guy, it's also good to have those things defined. This is not mysterious.
The user interaction is still there. You're still talking to your users. You're still doing design, but you're doing it as you're working. Well, they've gotten rid of the user, and they've replaced it with this management lackey called the project manager, or the product owner.
Don't do that.
But the product owner is not a customer. The product owner is usually a representative of the marketing department.
And I tried to tell this. I've actually tried. I've brought this thing up to people. It's like, hey, so I know you're the product owner, and you used to be the product manager, but we need to talk to the customer. Can we talk to the customer? And he's like, I'm the customer. Wait, are we doing Agile? Because are you buying this stuff as a product manager? You're buying our software? Because if you're not the guy buying it, paying the bills, how are you the customer? And they was like, no, this is how we're doing it.
So all of the guarantees that you'll get about building valuable software, they're gone. And then they put in the rigid time box, which they call a sprint, which is also a huge waste of time. Think how much waste there is in trying to size a story so you can do it in a 2-week sprint.
Silly.
And think of all.
It's a pipe dream. It's been shown to be completely impossible. All it does is make people lie, and it makes people have bad feelings, and people are threatened and put on pit plans because you weren't able to get it 17 points. It was 1,222.6 in the burn down chart. Blah blah blah. It's like, okay, guys. All right, I'm gonna make a part 2 of this because I'm at an hour and I don't want to make it more than an hour. All right, give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in part 2.